Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's episode. Feel free to share comments in the chat section. Of course, I'm prioritizing the talk, but I will get to the comments as well. Tonight's episode is a very interesting one. Today, I found myself wondering about how the universe was seen. And I was wondering about how it was seen as a machine first. Man was seen to be a mechanism of the universal sector, you know? So in the subtitle, I've written the universal container. And that's another way of saying I'm wondering about how many human beings, every human being, has looked at the universe and contained it. And I'm wondering about how does the containment of the universe occur? Is it just the voice of the environment that updates one's thoughts on reality? Or is it one's own experience from within that can update one's sense of knowledge, or how they know, or how they don't know? The lighthouses at the edge of thought is honestly a suggestion that when one reaches a sort of renunciate mindset where they want to see the world move first than them, it's as if that kind of phenomena I'm trying to acknowledge. Now, for me, it's a fascinating thing. That means one thing 100% has changed all these years since I've been wondering about who's looking through within my eyes, is that one thing is I've noticed as more thoughts have been observed, there has come a subtle complexity. That means I feel our subconscious is how the conscious mind is interpreting the unconscious and how much it allows that interpretation to change. So you see, thought becomes more complex when we have a sort of genetical conclusion to it, as if it is a sort of, like if you ask Noam Chomsky would probably tell you the mind is a sort of quality of matter. Of course, his position is that there are certain things happening that are inaccessible to our conscious mind. You know, so he, for example, sees it as a sort of genetical reason, as if we cannot, after some point, see or tinker with this biological machine to see how it is leading to consciousness, what it is, right? Now, the fascinating thing is that the human mind can entertain many stories, therefore it can entertain many stories of origin. And so I have had days where I thought I was purely a material creature. I've had days where I felt it's like, how can I be purely a material creature? There's something else, you know? And so really the thing is, it's like if you could see a percentage to how much I felt I knew the world and how much I didn't, that percentage was the known part was getting high and it was increasing the ego. So when you feel you know more than you don't know, guess what? You give yourself a speaker, a sort of, you hold the judge's hammer. So that's the thing. When I say the lighthouse at the edge of thought, it's a kind of, I'm wondering, it's a question I'm asking the soul of mankind. That if man did not impose anything, if he did not do anything, how would thought move? And this may be an idea that I feel many don't acknowledge, but if they do, it'll really ease them in the sense that the environment has a voice. Right now, you can say, I'm a part of the voice of your environment. You know, I'm a strange part of it. The environment speaks in many ways. The environment holds emotion as well. That means I have been emotionally at a neutrality, and then suddenly somebody I cared about walked into the room, and it was as if there was no longer emotional neutrality. The environment had brought forth an emotion out of me. Do you know? So I acknowledge it in various ways. I have, in some sense, a relationship with existence. This existential relationship is pretty much, I find everybody has their own relationship in the sense that it's your private room. You're in a private room with the whole cosmos. This is where independence arises from. You know, George Patton had this quote where he said, if everybody's thinking the same, nobody is thinking. This is the room where new thought emerges. Because I'm telling you, the issue is that there is so much rivers of language moving behind the person's eyes, rivers of abstract phenomena in their subtler planes, but the person is not a conscious personality. It's as if the universe doesn't have, is the universal container of their current moment doesn't have the authorization for the subtler reality to emerge. Because after some point you'll see it becomes like literally tapping your finger into a still pond. You know, you see a ripple with the intention. You see how the mind can animate abstraction or give it force in accordance to its intention and effort. So what it is you see, like, I think this is the issue. A lot of people feel they go through the mystical search, they go through the spiritual search to find this great self, you know, the higher self, whatever you call it, the soul of the soul of the soul, the Parabrahman, whatever archetype, whatever color you like to color it with, you know. The truth is, the ultimate doesn't have a color. It doesn't care for what man cares. So imagine the mystical practice taking one into an opinionless state. In that opinionless state, the past is seen as a mirage. You suddenly revert back to a presence that's just been here. Do you know? It's like prior to the story, prior to the unfolding of the language in your eyes, is like there's a presence. You know. Anyways, so this lighthouse at the edge of thought, I got to do this talk justice and share a personal experience with this. Okay. I have noticed when I want something and it's only from an inner reality, the outer reality doesn't have to listen to it. But when I want something from the inner reality cannot lie to itself. You know, it's reaching a sort of perfected state of attention where the self and other is inseparable. What you consider to be you and what you're considering to be others, you see, you need the distinction. You need to, like, you cannot be good without a reference of bad. You cannot be bad with a reference of good. Do you know? And every generation, civilization paints a certain narrative and people go out to fulfill whatever it is they see, you know. Back in the day, you know, children wanted to be warriors because simply their fathers were at war. Do you see? So it's as if the child's motivation and inspiration was also a response to the history at the time. That means I cannot, as much as I want to, be in any other sort of kind of notion of time. Do you know? It's like I am here now. Do you see? 2019 is it. This is when the eyes have opened, you know? And there's something strange. When you accept what you are, it leads to a strange contentment that harbors strength. I don't know how to tell you. That means it's like, I think I've had two sorts of blessings in this life. One was that my eyes were not closed to the Pure Lands. And the other is the fact that my eyes were open to what I would say, the inefficient attempts of man. That means I've been in many moments where literally the world was like, okay with your ego, man. You know, like the karma shook me. Karma shook me in a way where, imagine you feel like my ego has broken at times, as if like I took off the box from my head and I realized what world I was truly living in. This is the issue. This is the issue with a sort of selfishness, which I playfully say it's like the person is not done selling fish. When you're selfish, it's literally the attention is on one place. You're not tired of the self. Now, this is a strange concept, because when I say tired of the self, this doesn't mean you stop caring for the self. This means your attention has been taken by yourself. There is so many ways your attention can move, which, believe it or not, opens up your intelligence. And it opens up to your intelligence to an intuitive rhythmic abidance by that which feels honest to you. Internally, it has to do with behavior and attitude. The Stoics were onto something. Marcus Aurelius says, the soul is dyed with the colors of its thoughts. And the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, they say consciousness is like a glass orb spinning. This glass orb is going over so many surfaces that it's taking the color of the environment, of the moment. But what it is that if you are a personality, you seek purpose. You cannot be a personality and not have objectives or goals on this plane. You won't remain as a personality unless you engage it. Kind of like you will not stay in the vehicle unless you use it, you know? I'm going to tell you something unique that happened when I visited Iran. So I went to India in 2016, at the end of 2016, and at the end of after India, because it was near Iran, I went to Iran for the summer. And when I went to Iran, I was reacquainted with a family that I had not seen for many years. So it was as if I was like a totally different person meeting totally different people, even though they were family members. And I remember I was invited by one of them to go to what they do in Iran is that in the capital there isn't that much freedom to there isn't enough there isn't freedom to party. And so we drive outside of Tehran for like 2 hours and go to a cottage somewhere. My cousin wanted to show off his cottage, so we went there. It was funny. It's like I had come back from India with this kind of like opinionless kind of no sense of having to be a sort of self for a condition. I was like an unconditional self walking into the conditions of, the self of others. And so, anyways, I remember we drive 2 hours, we get to this place. I can see them taking out like the vodka bottle. But I remember there was this one kid which this kid would from the beginning of his whole thing, like from the beginning of the time he get there, he was just telling people how he was sick, how he was physically sick, how he was sick. And I remember I had there was a moment there where I had a conversation with him, and I told him, why are you constantly saying to people you're sick? What are you doing? And for a second, the person, it was like he snapped out of it. I would do something, of course, there would be times in the party where everybody would be drinking and I would be drinking, but I would suddenly go outside and go sit somewhere on the grass and kind of meditation like position and just sit. Meditation is no longer meditation for me. It has just become sitting. It used to be goal oriented, then you attain the goal and it comes and goes on its own. The intuitive impulse to observe your world. And I remember something happened. There was this kid and this other kid, and I snapped them out. I remember that was something I felt a bit proud about, At the end of it, he was no longer saying like just constant. It's as if, let me tell you what it is. Some people get fail in their youth at a certain simple thing to such a degree that they feel they have to repeat that thing until they feel they succeed. Do you know? I'll give you an example. Like there was this video, YouTube. I don't know. There was this commercial. Okay, and in this commercial, I saw it on YouTube. This commercial was showing all these kids who had been bullied in school. Trust me, there's no such thing as bullying when you see life as a battlefield. Only when you don't see it as a battlefield is you get bullied. You know what I mean? I have stories to tell you about how many fights. Me and my brother, I have a twin brother. Me and my brother would get into a lot of fights, physical fights, in our youth. You know, with others, with other people. You know. But anyways, what I'm saying is that in that video, all those people were bullied. They had reached some success, and in the video, they're like, "I make 200K a year." You know, screw you, bully. They were still like they were grown men, still fighting over a past moment, still trying to prove the past who they are, still haven't realized what's here now. Do you know? I'll tell you the most important thing, something that brings incredible amounts of free space for creativity. Realizing the past is past. It's past. It's gone. It came, you experienced it, and it's gone. So where are we left? The presence of the moment, which appears as an empty canvas awaiting the evocation of the free will and the divine will. What can be said? The storm makes the world into a storm. The clear breeze makes the world into a clear breeze. Where the attention goes, the texture, rhythm, and the dynamism of the moment occurs in accordance to that. When you think you're alone, it's the huge responsibility. It's the huge responsibility to realize you have to move your eyes. That's it. You have to move your eyes. You have to live your life. And you choose its boundaries. You choose how much the unknown is the unknown. You choose if you can't confront the unknown, typically what happens is you run into a belief. It's so easy to believe, guys. It is too easy. This is why I understand the importance of belief during certain actions and movements and systems. But at the same time, you know, language can be cruel. I have seen, I'm not joking, I have seen that by just sharing language, you can unlock attention. You can free it. Because the attention is stuck, because our species is conditioned to be a thought. We are thoughts believing in matter. How hilarious, isn't it? Isn't it hilarious? We are abstraction considering reality to be real. And we think we know what the world is. I will tell you, if 2019 was called Jon Snow, the cosmos is saying, you know nothing, Jon Snow. Because I'm telling you, after some point, it becomes a battle of language. So you'll notice this about your presence if you're mindful of yourself. That means you're aware that your mind is present. You see, something I didn't have when I was younger, just like that guy who I snapped out of his kind of self depreciating attitude. It's as if, okay, the world, you sometimes the light of reality doesn't shine on you. What then? What do you do then? Do you know? Do you know I've had moments where my sort of intuition, like you don't know how much of my life has gone to these talks, strangely. And I have been shocked of my own lack of resistance to the effort, you know? And I'll tell you this, there have been moments where my intuition, where I was in a private dialogue with the logos, where I felt, in some sense, I had become so still that I could see what was moving before I was moving. So in some sense, I reached, let me tell you, it's like, it's a very, when you realize you're a mind that is projecting a body rather than a body howling a mind in a brain only, when you acknowledge the presence of mind, what happens is mind is seen as cause. That means the body is seen as an effect of your attention. Now, when we say, for example, the other view that the person feels they're a body that's kind of like howling a brain mind around, that's when in some sense, the internal reality feels like the effect of the external cause. You see, free will cannot occur. You don't know you're free until the inner reality is where it began. You know? This distinction is very crucial. Behind our eyes, we are a creature of thought. In front of our eyes, we're a creature of matter. And in between oscillates the attention that appears to be part of a field of intelligence. Do you know what that means? That means individuality, any notion that entertains a collectivity, it's like individuality will always seen as a hallucination of a collective vision. It's as if something was collective all along, and we were just, you know, on tripping individually. Rabindranath Tagore says you cannot cross the sea by merely staring at it. You cannot, in another way, discover the true nature of your mind by just looking at it from a bunker of belief, from a terrace of belief. Language is lovely. Language is the people we love. Language is the movement of the mind of the world. Yet, when will humanity be conscious? That consciousness is the originator of locality. It is not in a location. That perhaps behind our eyes the unfathomable moves us. The unfathomable that cannot be personified. We cannot look at the source and be like it looks like us. It's like that's the humility of the multidimensional being. That it knows the singular. It has experienced the singular. For eons it has been at an eternal stillness. And then a voice appeared. The evocation appeared. This pool of energy before the Big Bang was like, all right, I'm going to be stuff now, you know? Did you know back in the day, science and philosophy were the same? And philosophy comes from the word philosophia, which means love of wisdom. And what wisdom was attention to that which is importantly real. Because I'm telling you, we crawl out of the cave of our own psychological development. That's your conditioning. And the way I kind of found an interesting way to speak about it was that the person wakes up, like the child opens its eyes and waves of data, waves. That means it's these waves of data stretch from just the body language of the people around it to the kind of condition, the system of design. It's as if, let me tell you why nowadays it's becoming important to tell children the truth. You cannot hide their eyes anymore because the world has become a digital place. What that means is the child has access to ideas even before the parent can suggest it to the child. Do you see? That means our eyes are in the wilderness. That means a sort of savage, not savageness, but a sort of, and a technology has brought forth intense impact on the mind of the children. Do you know? This is the weird thing. I'll call it, this is what I feel is the inefficient part. That children subconsciously are seeking behavioral gratification. You can say it's such an empty place in this cosmos that the attention of the other seems to give realness to one. That means, I'm telling you, a human being requires a percentage of expression throughout the day and a percentage of reception to keep the mind healthy. And what that means is, in one manner, it should watch the world, like, make sure you see 50% of what happens throughout the day. And, the other 50% you can dabble as a mental entity, It's easy being a mind, because the mind and the body, there's something going on with them, that it's like the body is in its own room, the mind is in its own room. That means the body is in the mind's room. The mind is a bigger room in which the body is a room in. Do you know? So the body, once one steps out, they realize they're standing right beside where all their thoughts have stood in their life. The universal container, how life was seen as a machine. Pretty much there are worldviews that liberate man and worldviews that enslave man. And if the being doesn't feel they have a choice to shift their view of the world, then what is freedom? What is the point of it? Why do you have freedom of thought and freedom of speech if you are not allowing yourself to see in new ways? There is a strange momentum to how intelligence happens that suggests innately how the universal sector is moving. You are kind of your own cosmic feedback. You are like an access point to how this universal sector is. Any act of intuition followed will lead to a point where you feel you're being watched. You will feel the unknown's movement a bit vaster than your own, and then you will feel more like innately a watcher. So what that means is the micro being, microcosmic kind of being, you know, is dwelling in certain stories of its micro analysis of the cosmos. But when it suddenly sees the macrocosmic picture, what that means is the world the ego is living in is changing, therefore causing the ego to change, therefore causing the idea of self to change. You're like, oh my god, the earth isn't just the center of the universe, it's spinning around the sun. Do you know? And there are, like various findings. I think it was Laplace that kind of took a version of a view, a kind of image of the cosmos to a Napoleon, and Napoleon says, "I don't see any God in this," and Laplace said it works fine without it, like something like that. The attempt to make the unknown known, and based on our assumption on how much we feel we can know it, we get pulled towards various thought streams. It's about how much projection authorization there is. And here's the thing, when you go into an external environment, let me tell you, externally there's one tactic the whole karma is using. It's dividing and conquering. That's, giving a desire to someone is a division of them. It's a fragmentation. Anytime you have a desire for something, that means you see another self of yours that can be. You see a potential parallel self. So then there is a fragmentation. This is why they say somebody who lies has to remember every person he's lying to. This is why lying, dishonesty is not an efficient tactic, especially for the fields of karma of this plane of existence, Because there's no point. Life is too short to lie. Do you know? Now, I'm not speaking about the concrete jungle. In the concrete jungle, perhaps lying is self-defense, but Rumi says, I died as a mineral and I became a plant. I died as a plant and I rose to animal. I died as an animal and I was man. Why should I fear death? When was I less by dying? I shall die once more as man, to soar with angels blessed. But even from angelhood I must pass on to that which no mind has ever conceived. It's kind of like an evolution of attention through various programs of objectivity being the cause, then reaching subjectivity being the cause, and then reaching a point where the veil of thought is what separates the mind from the soul. And when it reaches that point, literally it's stepping out of a dualistic journey. And the voice of the singular, it has its own voice. It's a truth you cannot hide, because when you lie, you become different people. You entertain unauthentic self, and that leads to inefficiency. And to be honest, we have to be playful with language. because the story can go either way. As much as there is eternal hope, there is also an eternal lack of hope. You see, it's so different when you have to write something yourself than compared to you waiting for some unknown intelligence to come and hold your hand and you move the pen, you know? It's a vision. You have to realize it's all happening now. The here and now is such an important concept because it is the last concept. You know, it is the last need for subjectivity. When you move as a presence of your personality, you're not bound by your personality. But when you move as a personality dictating the present, then your presence is in its own room. You're not there. Okay, guys. My attention is coming on the chat. Welcome, everyone. Just so Dawn, I'm looking at your comment. That's the thing, right? It's how do we trust the finding, whatever it is. Let me tell you what I feel could be a resolution to what you're saying, just to Dawn. How do we get a confirmation of the unknown, as in the sense that it is the reality of some dimension, not just a figment of imagination? That's the thing. It's the issue with trust, and it has to do with time is still linear. Time is still linear for you. This is why you can't trust it, because there's references of different times that make you doubt the experience. So believe it or not, I feel that you cannot trust anything if you don't trust the phenomena as a moment of your mind. That means this is why I'm saying trust is important, because in some level you have no other option. Because the mind, the sensory data, is appearing as a spherical spaciousness, attention to spaciousness. So what I'm saying is the person may feel they are not, I don't know. I think the thing is that sometimes you don't trust the unknown because your attention is on something. I'll give you an example. It's as if the person has a presentation. He has to go show a project to a boardroom, imagine. But he's thinking if he's closing his eyes and trying to see, like, you know, if he's finding the nature of consciousness. Whatever finding he gets, there's a subconscious dismissal of the finding because of the errand at the future at hand. Do you know? So it's I think it's very hard to have obligations to be a individualized consciousness and then to truly find the unknown. You know, it's so it could be that the environment's voice is so loud that even if you find something, you won't trust it. Do you know? It depends on how real it is for you, what you're doing. This is why I'm saying it's so important to find the unknown, and the unknown is everywhere. The unknown is in every moment. Every moment you can just consider what you know about everything is a snapshot photo, and there's endless photos that can be that can emerge. Sometimes when I speak, it's like I'm like there's a concept, and I'm walking around it in different degrees, seeing different ways it is real to me. You know. But also there's this thing that when the unknown comes to you, you will definitely know it's real. That if it's the unknown that's moving, you can't doubt it because you know what you are. I'll tell you an example. Okay. I was I found myself beside a fountain. I think this was 2009, 10. I don't know. It was a while back. A while back. I sat down beside a fountain. I had kind of like, my fingertips touching each other kind of symmetrically. And I was just sitting there and I was contemplating like I had hit a failure. I literally felt like I had reached a dead end. You know that feeling when you reach a dead end? It's like you can't do anything. That feeling. So with that feeling, I was sitting there and I was just breathing beside this fountain. I felt like internally there was too much intensity, so I just sat down by that fountain and I was just like breathing. I noticed something very strange, that I started in my exhalation. When I would exhale, I noticed a stream of I noticed a stream of thinking, a stream of thought that was moving faster than the way I think. Like I know the speed I think. Do you know? I'm aware of kind of like how much my foot is on the pedal, of the vehicle. But I'm telling you, that was a moment where I had tapped into an access to what I felt was a line of thought that was moving faster than I was willing it to. That's how I could notice it. For example, I knew that I don't think like this normally. I knew that I like language did not appear to me like this normally. And so in every exhale, suddenly it ended up becoming what felt to me was like a long time, but was maybe just a couple minutes. And there was something that I heard in that sort of inner, I observed in the movement of that thought stream, that I went home and I checked something and it was validated. So it was a way where I noticed where it was as if when you are able to hear, then words are said to you. If you're not able to hear, then nothing will be said. Hey, Justidon, I don't know what you mean by the alumna beta alpha omega. In what sense do you mean? Yeah, anyways, so that's an example of a moment where I felt I could trust the unknown because it was different to what I knew. It was literally like intelligence was evoked in my moment with a different pattern, with a different kind of touch to it. Yeah. I personally feel that we are moving from a known phenomena into an unknown phenomena, which we can't possibly know how we will know it. Because the experience can change in ways that totally shift the psychological expression of the person. What that means is our mind, the content of our mind is a response to the environment. How fascinating. It's like we use the external environment to the objective environment to project the subjective environment. Nice. Just a done, I'm reading the comment. Trust me, it's like Trust is the main factor of it. No creative action, no invention could have been invented if a dude didn't trust it. There has to be something that interests you more. You see, it's like this is the difference. We can't just say the purpose of life is survival. Then we would be indistinct. Like we'd kind of look at other animals, lesser species, and we'd be like, okay, they're surviving too. Are we the same? And so we can say, yes, objectively we are trying to get by, but man has an additional advantage. Man has a mind. Man has projected a mind. Or you can say nature has projected man's mind, whichever way you're comfortable. But the thing is, this mind has to be used, right? It's something that's here. And that's what I'm wondering about. And when I look at society, I don't get a sense that our civilization has the right picture of how intelligent the being is. Because it has to do with finding the accurate dimensions. It becomes a harder puzzle. That means, like, imagine we were employers in a big company and we were looking at employees, right? So we would imagine we had employees and we had to go check. Imagine like they put me and you into like a situation where we had to go and kind of like everyone in this live chat, imagine we had to go to some company and we had to kind of see what the issue with the employees are, right? And the way we would find that is to see when the employee comes to work, where is its attention? Kind of like how Einstein said, if you judge a fish by its ability to fly, then the fish will go on thinking it's stupid its whole life. So what that means is abilities emerge in different environments. Do you know? We are very, you can say, becoming more advanced as a civilization and becoming aware of the world we live in, but we are losing sight of the worlds that live in us. And the issue is, before media, before the efforts of globalization and the internet, it's as if like there wasn't a platform, and there still isn't. You know what that means is we are now, it's like we got, let's say, we got external freedom of speech. Now we want to bring out the inner speech. The inner speech is literally how the mind is, it throws the world back when the world is thrown at it. Oh, just Adon, I'm reading your comment. Interesting. Eventually, you have to trust the some part of the technology. You know, it's not like you can be totally empty-handed. I'm not telling everybody to walk. We have. I'm not saying we should be mindless. I'm saying we should be mindful. What that means is just add an extra dimension of observance prior to engagement or reaction. That observance is important. That observance is like sometimes when you throw, it's here's the difference. It's like people are throwing a rock into a still pond and they're reacting based on the first ripple, not realizing you have to wait until the ripples end. So this is why patience was a virtue, because without patience you can't see some things fully. I treat language, believe it or not, like it's programs. It's geometry to me. That means I could evoke any sort of geometrical image and feel like, okay, this is it. You know. So I'm kind of, I feel like I was in the battlefield of language for a very long time, and especially with where I was born, it was the environment had a loud voice. You know. So it's very easy to forget that you are here once. When you realize you're here once, you drop the inefficient acts with yourself. Sometimes you can't trust the world because you can't trust yourself. Or there could be ways where you feel the world doesn't trust yourself. Oh, I remember I was getting to it. I never finished it. My intuition at some point, I felt like there was a unique attention on me from my unconscious, and I remember getting this vision, where in this vision, just this image, kind of like seeing an instant preview of a movie behind my eyes. Yeah, like I see a moment where I have been forgotten by that attention. You don't know, even if you work with your intuition, any work you do, you build emotion upon. You cannot, believe it or not, do something without some sort of a rhythm of emotion, you know? When you don't associate with a thought, you become an observer of the subject, of the subjective realm. Then you don't have emotions hitting you. Do you know? That means sometimes when externally, like it was a bad day, I didn't even blame the external world. You know, I didn't even blame myself. I was just looking at the sky and I'm like, okay, why this? Why are my eyes walking this way today? You know? If we build civilization in a way where it does not require our intelligence, we will be forgotten by our own creation. And that's the, I think, grand paranoia, that we are sacrificing natural human environments for unnatural competence. And on some level, it's like, can you ignore the cyberspace culture that's going to arise, the cyber cultures that will arise? You cannot. I feel it's we are too we have invested too much on this poker hand. We cannot let it go. So I feel the world is going to become incredibly technological. You know, people are going to reach a point, maybe long after we're gone, but they may reach a point where they will exchange their humanness for an experience that is not contained to the human body. You know, it's like, how important is it for a species to kind of realize it's a field of intelligence? Well, if its civilization is dependent on its individuality, then it's like you have to keep ignorance as bliss. You have to keep that bliss alive that comes from ignorance, because the chaos of it can be overwhelming. So it's like you reach a point where you're like, how much do you need to cover the eyes of children, you know, from the nature of existence? That's another way of saying how much do you want to cover the eyes of an individual conscious being in the face or in the presence of a collective unconscious. It's like, how much is there a need? Yes, Idris, I agree. But when I say cyber, I mean right now, do you see how I'm considering, for example, an objective self and a subjective self? Imagine in the future, your digital self will be as important as to maintain throughout the day than your non-digital. Like, to be honest, a civilization obsessed with data will get into any deal to get more data. That's the issue. I remember how would I say it? Somebody just pretty much told me the story that it's like of an extraterrestrial illusion. That means it's like people are so starving for truth that it's like the next store that has a better deal they will run after. They don't wonder about the life of their eyes. They're wondering about how life is seeing their eyes. That imagine in the future just an extraterrestrial being comes down and this extraterrestrial being can heal. Imagine it can heal. Pretty much this idea, guys, that it's going to be man is going to give his power away because he doesn't understand it. He doesn't understand the value of the human mind. This is why he freaks out over overpopulation. He doesn't see that the mind is the solution provider. It is the response to the world. We are 8 billion minds. Think about it, like 8 billion inner realities. How many thoughts does visit a person throughout a day? Just imagine 8 billion, and all these inner realities are kept dormant. Nobody knows about them unless the person feels they can share. So what it means is that there is a world underneath the earth. But this is a world which is actually, I find, behind. How would I say it? It's like I remember there was this story that there was this underground city, and there were these people in this underground city who had never seen the sky, and they weren't allowed. You needed a certain status to get out of the underground city. And so these people, I remember when they step out of the underground city, they suddenly, the value of the sun and life has a totally different meaning for them. Do you know? And it's like what motivated them in the underground city was something about the city above. You know, and I find similarly, this underground city is the inner realms of man. The lighthouses at the edge of thought is where the ultimate conclusion arises. It's like, oh, this is something cool I can share, actually. Strangely, I think this is the only time I can share. In my science fiction novel, which is still unpublished, there's something unique that happens. It's called the Messenger of Giants, and there's this main character named Rasul, and he has this friend, which is this kind of strangely. I thought of infusing a robot with the archetype of like a shaman, with the archetype of a tribal shaman, right? And so the story is that this chapter is called, if I remember correctly, it's called "The Ocean at the Top of the Mountain Peak." You know, something crazy like that. I thought of you see usually a volcano with fire. I'm like, okay, let's have an ocean, a whirling ocean. So what happens is Justicar Nova, this robotic fellow, he's a leader of the robotic realms in the story, and Rasul is just this guy who literally it's kind of strange, but his past life, it's his first incarnation as a human. He was just like the consciousness of a galaxy or something. It's like, so his karma is very strange in the story. So Justicar Nova, this robot, comes to Rasul and they kind of greet like friends. And the robot says, "We have to climb. I have received a vision from my inner programs." You know? I think I've done, like, I'll tell you, there's something so cool about this where I've tried, because I've made the robot into a shaman, it still has visions, but its visions are interpreted as if, like, the limits of the intuition of the robot is like he suddenly gets a message, access denied. And so what happens is they climb up this mountain, and as they're climbing up this mountain, Justicar Nova, which is that robot shaman, he looks at Rasul and he tells him the story of a program. The robot acknowledges people as programs. He says the program of Adi Yogi Rinpoche. And the way I've written Adi Yogi, it's like all the eyes are number ones, 0 and 1. So Justicar Nova goes on telling this kind of myth, this story of myth, that the center of this mountain peak, there is there is one person. Oh, I totally forgot to say it. This part's. Bear with me, guys, as I get through this. I don't have the written story in front of me, but just to recap, Rasul and Justicar Nova, this robotic shaman, are walking up this mountain called the Ocean at the Top of the Mountain Peak. Now, as they are going, Justicar Nova is telling Rasul certain stories and why they're there. And something I didn't mention is that he says they're here to find a programmer named Dante, right? And this programmer named Dante, Justicar Nova is telling Rasul, is a person who has trapped billions of people in a virtual reality simulation that she has control over. That means so many people are living virtual lives, simulated lives they don't know about. And so Justicar Nova, this shamanic kind of robot, has had a vision, so he calls Rasul. It's kind of like, in the whole thing, in the whole book, Rasul is a strange character. He doesn't need to get introduced. Everybody knows who he is in the book. They all call him the wise one, and there's a reason. I'll tell you eventually the evolution of the story. Probably not in this talk, but I'll get to it. But the thing is, Rasul is a character that the world protects him from karma. Kind of like how in Buddha, there's a idea of this cobra on top of his head, covering his head from the rain. That cobra, I don't think it's an actual cobra. It's a metaphor for how karma, nature protects the being from karma. So anyways, so Justicar Nova says we're here to find this programmer named Dante. Just a second, guys. And then he tells the story of Adi Yogi Rinpoche, which was this incredibly enlightened woman. And she suddenly gets a vision that she has to climb this mountain. She follows her vision and she gets to the top of this mountain. And in the top of the mountain, she finds a desert. in this like snowy mountain she climbs. At the top of it she reaches, it's like the top of the mountain is another dimension. She meets this desert and her intuition tells her to go forth, and she goes in the desert and the intuition tells her you have to go to the center, you know, the center of this kind of desert, you know. And she goes and walks and she is so thirsty, you know. Then her intuition tells her she has to sit down, and she sits down, and then what happens is that she experiences in 3 minutes, three, I don't know what it was, a 3,000 three, I don't know what number, I don't know if it was 300 or 3,000 years of thirst. She just sits there in 3 minutes. She experiences an incredible amount of time. And afterwards, what happens is from underneath her, she's remained hovering, and a whirlpool of water occurs from underneath her. And she's just hovering in this kind of whirlpool that's occurring, and she's just in the middle of it, right? And then the legend has it she descends down, you know, and she's in this secret mountain, divine mountain, right? Now, Dante is another programmer who's managed to go in here, into this mountain, and no, this mountain doesn't accept anyone, doesn't accept any being, you know? And so what happens is Rasul and Justa Carnova, they keep going. They keep going, and they eventually reach the top of the mountain, and they see the whirlpool, and they have these kind of hoverboards, hover pads, like literally a giant square they both stand on, that takes them to the center, you know. And as Justa Carnova finishes telling the whole story to Rasul, Rasul kind of smiles at Justa Carnova, puts his hand on his like shoulder and says, I know what needs to happen, right? And Rasul just sits in a kind of like meditation position and just closes his eyes, you know. And Justa Carnova's just staring at Rasul like, what's gonna happen, you know? And what happens is Rasul automatically, this light comes, makes him hover, and takes him into the center of the whirlpool. And Justa Carnova, this robot, I remember I wrote something incredible here. This robot suddenly bows like a holy man with his hands above his head. And then I write a line here where I say, robots don't cry, but they reboot. And so this robot saw something so unique, so profound, that it caused him to reboot, you know. That was the peak emotional intensity of the way I painted the story there. So long story short, now this chapter finishes here, but I'm going to give you a sneak peek of what happens when Rasul goes inside the mountain. Of course, I forgot to mention my science fiction novel is set in the year 5025. Okay, and in the year 5025, there are not just robots living among people, but there's even citizenship of extraterrestrials on Earth, and even the UN has a galactic sector where aliens come and speak about how they're being treated by humans and whatnot. You know, even it gets so sophisticated that technology has evolved to a point where cows, like there's this cow which has robotic AI kind of connected to it, so it can speak and it has a mind like a citizen, you know. And it comes and says, we cows have been eaten by humans for so many decades, we need like to get something about for that, you know. And so there's just a very unique kind of setting, right? So the thing is, there's also a concept in this novel thing where I say they're star beings, right? These are beings who, like in the story, like one of their parents is like an extraterrestrial, you know. So Dante is considered as a star being, you know. And so what happens is when Rasul goes into the cave, he comes to an embassy of this kind of galactic organization on Earth, you know. So that whole mountain that was being seen as, oh my God, so divine and all this, was just a galactic embassy, you know. And so Dante was a citizen, so he could enter, you know. So eventually Rasul goes and realizes Dante is like this young blonde girl, you know. But it's very interesting because the program stops. Dante stops the whole simulation. So it's like there's a profound concept. Something unique happens, and Rasul makes some friends there. It's very important, crucial for how the story's gonna end up. So, anyways, guys, that's that's the science fiction part of the talk, you know. All right, guys, I need a couple minute intermission. I'll be back. Okay. Sorry, guys, needed an intermission there. Thanks, all there is. Yeah, hopefully I'll be able to wrap it up. You know, there's something that sometimes when you begin kind of creating something, you constantly see ways of expanding it, and then at some point you just have to pull the curtain on it. You know. I wanted to also kind of speak about how when we are more, let's say, a kind of intellectually driven civilization, we may some emotions will maybe are kind of held in our blind spots. That means it's like the rational mind goes in accordance to external values, but sometimes there is an emotional kind of maintenance to the moment too. You know, so this is something actually really cool I should share, that in some sense the thought gets momentum and it moves at a certain, you can say, speed. How would I say it? Okay, let's say somebody starts running, and when you're running and you're thinking at the same time, that's a different texture of an experience. So it's kind of like when thought moves really quickly, it changes its texture. It's like there's a leap of attention. Like, for example, imagine like, let's say you visualize the word apple, with a Sharpie written on a piece of paper. Now imagine the wind moving this kind of piece of paper at such a fast speed. It's like moving in the tornado. And now suddenly imagine in the tornado you see apples. Do you know what I mean? So the unique thing is, like, there's a certain vision, a certain framework, a certain subjective landscape. In accordance to how the attention is upon the landscape can change. It's honestly the difference of, like, treating the unknown with respect. I could totally see, like, a mystic kind of shouting it, like, the future generations, respect the unknown, god damn it. I think our advantage is that there are unanswered questions. I think that's our opportunity as people alive, especially in any moment in history. Of course, there's unanswered questions, but the thing is, some questions require an intensity of action to be built up. We got to kind of see that our civilization, as much as it can be rebuilt quickly if there was a tragedy, at the same time, it's one of those things that it took a very long time to develop. Think about, like, the brain. Parts of the brain, it took them millions of years to develop. So think of it this way, that behaviors and civilization and culture are kind of, it took a long time to develop. And now imagine how there was war. Do you know how many painters died at war? Painters who never knew they could be painters. It's like the ultimate question is, like, what do we do with temporary journeyers in a manifest world. Either free will kind of contributes. It's like the story of civilization is going to be like that next level kind of Noah's Ark where it's trying to keep the human mind preserved. Emotion is there. I think when the child is born, it develops an emotional relationship with existence first, which has to do with temperature, believe it or not, with temperature and light. That means the child is first realizing what is, that's like the first kind of wave of duality hitting the child. What is cold, what is not, what is comfortable, what is uncomfortable. You know, eventually there's so much oscillation between these as the person runs laps around the sun that it becomes, as the years go by, you see many senses of self within one moment. Pretty much that's how it's appearing. You know, now you can also avoid the self. You know, you cannot choose to see yourself. You can be so occupied by an objective action that the purpose of life doesn't need to be anything other than the objective action. It's like somebody who has to like build a table. You go ask him what the purpose of life is, he's going to tell you it's like life is like building a table, man. You know, the action it defines the internal environment. I feel like reading some stuff from Hagakure, which is it's pretty much the book of the samurai, guys. We're gonna get into the book of the samurai right now. There's something in there because I remember one quote from there that's very significant to acknowledge. All right, this is some stuff I found. So the person who wrote the book of Hagakure is Yamamoto Tsunetomo. So you can consider that if you want to get a glimpse into a samurai's mind, samurai probably had to study this book. Yamamoto Tsunetomo in Hagakure says, "There is surely nothing other than the single purpose of the present moment. A man's whole life is a succession of moment after moment. There will be nothing else to do and nothing else to pursue. Live being true to the single purpose of the moment." I mean, that's a good thing to tell warriors, you know. In the Hagakure, it says, "There is something to be learned from a rainstorm. When meeting with a sudden shower, you try not to get wet and run quickly along the road. But doing such things as passing under the eaves of houses, you still get wet. When you are resolved from the beginning, you will not be perplexed, though you will still get the same soaking. This understanding extends to everything. Even if it seems certain that you will lose, retaliate. Neither wisdom nor technique has a place in this. A real man does not think of victory or defeat. He plunges recklessly towards an irrational death. By doing this, you will awaken from your dreams." Okay, this one's a bit intense. I think what it means is that if you are not if you are dishonest with the moment, you won't see beyond the illusion. So what he's saying is live life more than, you know, living the concepts of life. It's another way of saying maybe. In the Hagakure, it says, "To give a person an opinion, one must first judge well whether that person is of the disposition to receive it or not." Well, I'll tell Yamamoto Tsunetomo that sometimes some things have to be said because there's no other time to say it. In the Hagakura it says, be true to the thought of the moment and avoid distraction. Other than continuing to exert yourself, enter into nothing else, but go to the extent of living single thought by single thought. The Book of the Samurai says it is a wretched thing that the young men of today are so contriving and so proud of their material possessions. Men with contriving hearts are lacking in duty. Lacking in duty, they will have no self-respect. And guys, I gotta say something here, especially with the last line, that lacking in duty, they will have no self-respect. It's the same situation of why the person is willing to be cruel, because the person wants the validation of the environment. Do you see? So it's as if people, the book is kind of suggesting that like their attention is on the simple prize, not the complex prize. You know, most people want to win easy. So this duty must come from a new narrative, a new story the children of the future generations will be telling themselves about who they are. The Book of the Samurai says, it is said that what is called the spirit of an age is something to which one cannot return. That this spirit gradually dissipates is due to the world's coming to an end. For this reason, although one would like to change today's world back to the spirit of 100 years or more ago, it cannot be done. Thus it is important to make the best out of every generation. Yeah, and what he's saying here is incredibly realistic, guys. It's simply what we're left with, our glimpse into the history that's happening now. With every breath, there is a potential for history to change. The Book of the Samurai Hagakura says, this is the substance of the way of the samurai. If by setting one's heart right every morning and evening, one is able to live as though his body were already dead, he gains freedom in the way. His whole life will be without blame, and he will succeed in his calling. There's something I said I think it was like maybe 3 talks ago or something. Can you be here as if you were never here? That's a sort of pure acknowledgement of the moment. Do you know? How it's, believe it or not, Alan Watts was right. He said it's like a symphony. It's literally this simulation of a subjective glory behind the objective realm. It's a symphony. It comes and goes. It's like the weather. It's like, you know, can you really have somebody explain the weather to you? No, the weather of your mind is in accordance to your design and DNA. How you are a person to yourself, in what light you see yourself, you know. So anyways, guys, I'm going to continue with this quote tunnel. When one is writing a letter, he should think that the recipient will make it into a hanging scroll. Bushido is realized in the presence of death. This means choosing death whenever there is a choice between life and death. There is no other reasoning. I think it means being able to acknowledge what is really here compared to what one wants to be here. I think that's the implication of it. Anyways, Hagakura says, in the book it said, if a warrior is not unattached to life and death, he will be of no use whatsoever. The saying that all abilities come from one mind sounds as though it has to do with sentient matters, but it is in fact a matter of being unattached to life and death. With such non-attachment, one can accomplish any feat. And that's another way of, I think he's saying, it's like, if you're attached to an outcome, you're overwhelmed by anything deviating from there. So you'll freak out when something happens that is not what you want, you know. So he's saying, but it in fact a matter of being unattached to life and death. With such non-attachment, one can accomplish any feat. Yeah, you know, no resistance, endless effort, you know. So the next quote says, there's nothing we should be quite so grateful for as the last line of the poem that goes, when your own heart asks. Wow. When your own heart asks. That's it, guys. When your own heart asks. That sentence is so, it has such great geometry to it. It's crazy. When your own heart asks, that means the question is not being told from outside. It will be a moment where you put all language, you don't throw it away, you don't do anything, you just stop it. For one moment, watch. And that silence, that stillness, that instantaneity of the simplicity of how the moment is being itself, this is the unattached state. It is the observer aware that it's observing. Attributelessly, you know. So then you can work with any attribute. You are not defined by what you see. Then you'll find a sort of, you have to trust, you trust the unknown before the known. There we go. The Book of the Samurai says, matters of great concern should be treated lightly. Master Itei commented, matters of small concern should be treated seriously. Okay. Yamamoto Tsunetomo says, in the Kamigata area, they have a sort of tiered lunchbox they use for a single day when flour wheeling. Upon returning, they throw them away, trampling them underfoot. The end is important in all things. It is the spiritless to think that you cannot attain to that which you have seen and heard the masters attain. The masters are men. You are also a man. If you think that you will be inferior in doing something, you will be on that road very soon. Yeah. You know, you gotta put the right coordinates in your GPS system, you know. Yamamoto Tsunetomo says, respect, honesty, courage, rectitude, loyalty, honor, benevolence. If one is but secure at the foundation, he will not be pained by departure from minor details or affairs that are contrary to expectation. But in the end, the details of a matter are important. The right and wrong of one's way of doing things are found in trivial matters. If by setting one's heart right every morning and evening one is able to live as though his body were already dead, he gains freedom in the way. Yeah, we read this. Yamamoto Tsunetomo says, single-mindedness is all-powerful. Tether even a roasted chicken. Sincerity does not only complete the self, it is the means by which all things are completed. As the self is completed, there is human-heartedness. As things are completed, there is wisdom. This is the virtue of one's character and the way of joining the internal and external. Thus, when we use this, everything is correct. Guys, I got a slow hand clap for that. That's it. This guy just, you know, hit a home run, you know. Okay, there's too many quotes. I can't read all of this. I'll read the last one. In the highest level, a man has the look of knowing nothing. If this is true, Socrates was also a samurai. You know, he says, you know, to know that you know nothing is the real wisdom. So, anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. If anybody has any comment or anything, let me know now. Hopefully, this science fiction book I'm trying to write is it's gonna come out soon. The thing is I feel there's so much work left to do still. There's so much things left to say in it, but it's not complete. So maybe I'll release it in volumes, like volume 1. Like it has a certain range of chapters. Maybe I'll release like 10 by 10 chapters, you know? Something like that could work, you know, but I don't think I'd be able to publish the whole thing until it's like complete, you know. So anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. My greatest encouragement is that throughout the day, find at least some moments. If you can't find it in your environment, you know, like in a social arena, find it in a solo arena, you know. Find 10 to 20 minutes if you feel you need to. Eventually you'll feel it. Like for 10 minutes, just sit still and silent and don't do anything and have no opinion. Just watch. You reach a sort of stillness and silence and keep the conscious attention there, and then let the movements of the world emerge and integrate with it, how the actions of the day are required, you know. What I'm saying is it's kind of like this day is the moment the person wakes up, especially in you know, modern society. You got to run. It's like the many actions are trying to, as much actions as possible are trying to be done throughout the day, you know. So in the middle of that speed, imagine driving really fast and suddenly just stopping the car for a second and just relaxing, making sure you're in a proper state, then drive, you know, the thoughts of the day. So anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. Much blessings and namaste. And the lighthouse at the edge of thought, that's the presence that the personality is basking in. It is its self-effulgence. The moment is complete before the idea of incompletion arrives. That's a kind of being, you know. Okay, guys, thanks for tuning in. Much blessings and